All right, you guys, it's 11 o'clock. I'm on here to do this live with you after much requests and saying, hey, you know what? It'd be more fair if you did Catherine Pooler and the Distress Inks versus the Distress Oxides, which I did. So I'm going to do that today. These are the colors that I've lined up that I think are compatible, and we are going to take it through 4 different tests. And if you happen to jump online and are catching this live and you want to see something else, let me know in the comments. I hope I catch it because I can't always be looking up seeing. So I hope I see it. If I don't, I'm very sorry. But what we're going to do is we are going to color blend it. We're going to dip it. We're going to stamp with it. And we are going to emboss with it. So those are the 4 that we are going to do. I know that the dipping is not something really that a lot of people do with the Distress Ink. They do that more with the Distress Oxides, but I figured, hey, what the heck? Let's just try it. All right, so the colors that I have lined up that I have in my stash that are most likely to go together is the Spice Marmalade and Orange Twist, the Lime Rickety, and the Twisted Citron. This is the best that I could do with what I have, so hopefully I got it, and might not use all these. Coral Cabana with the Abandoned Coral, Something Borrowed with the Mermaid Lagoon, Fiesta Blue with the Peacock Feathers, and then last but not least, the Mustard Seed with the Limoncello. So if I do one on one thing, I will make sure that I do it on another. The cardstock that I'm using is Gina K 120 pound. This will be used when I do my stamping. And then the paper I'm using for the blending and the dipping is just a Distress cardstock, water safe cardstock by Tim Holtz. Let me see if I can't find it. It is this. It's the Distress watercolor cardstock. All right, because I know it's going to hold up with my water. I am going to keep in mind my color families as I do this, so I might not use all of these colors. But I did want to just pull some out so I know what goes together and what does not. And we can try to get a really nice comparison. So the first thing that we're going to do is I want to do a basic blend, and I will start off with my Distress Inks. So the colors that I'm going to use for this, I think I'm going to create like a rainbow ombre effect for this, are going to be my, let's do Twisted Citron, which is going to be Lime Rickety later, Mustard Seed, which is going to be Limoncello, and Peacock Feathers, which is going to be Fiesta Blue. Let's start off first with our Distress Ink, and I'm just going to basically, again, I'm just going to create kind of that beautiful rainbow type effect with these 3 colors. And so got my yellow down, let me get my green down, my citron down, and then let me get my Peacock Feathers down. And I think we kind of all know how this is going to work, but I have to start off. I got to be fair to both inks. Okay, that's super pretty as is. Let's go ahead and throw some water on it to get it to move a little. And then we will move on and see and compare this against the Catherine Pooler. So let me put some water on. and that does start to move around, does what Distress ink does. So it's so pretty. Just love it. And then you guys know if you want bigger droplet marks, you just hold the Distress bottle. Or you pull the trigger slow and it gives that. All right, so that's cool. Let me pick up some of that, dab off some of that color. So this is what our Distress ink did. Now let's go ahead and see if our Catherine Pooler ink does this. And I still want to run another test on this, all right? Not quite done yet. Okay, so I'm going to set these up here, move these down. And again, I'm going to start off with my limoncello. I'm just going to take and try to ink up my sponge dabber. And again, starting off and working my way in. All right. Tends to apply about the same. The Distress ink had a little bit more color on it, but that could just be because of the difference in the mustard seed and the limoncello. Then for this one, let me do my Twisted Citron. And again, I'm going to go off the page. All right. And then let me do Fiesta Blue on the bottom. The reason I'm doing this is because I really want to be able to use these samples afterwards. It really does blend out quite lovely. You do see a little bit of that sponge mark there, but who knows, maybe once we put the water down it'll move. All right, we're going to spray it just like we did Tim Holtz Distress ink. Okay. Now, I am noticing on this one, especially down here, that it's holding its shape, its color a little bit, but that doesn't necessarily mean, because I was really heavy-handed on that and not so much on the other one, so that could just be like my fault. But let me go ahead and just dab this up like I did with the Distress ink. There we go. And this is the comparison between these two. So Tim Holtz is over here, Catherine Pooler is right here. So for this technique, I prefer my Distress ink. I just think it blended out. Although this is beautiful and it does blend, but if you want it to move with your water and such, Distress ink is the way to go. I do have another test that I want to run on this. I do want to get this relatively dry, and I want to see after it dries if my Catherine Pooler ink is going to move like my Distress ink does. I always dry the back side because the water seeps through, so it's important that you also get your back side of your projects when you're doing the drying. Okay, now I want to spray them both, and I want to see if this is going to move like this one moves, even though it's been heat set. I am thinking, from what I understand, that my Catherine Pooler is not going to move once it's wet again since it's been heat set. But I very well could be wrong. So I'm really going to go in here and because I want to see it. So I'm going to go in with the blue. Going to let that sit there. All right, and then let me grab a paper towel and go ahead and just lift it. Let's see if it moves. And You can see the watermark on that. And this one was moved as well. However, this one was a little bit more of a subtle move, whereas the Catherine Pooler, you can definitely still see that watermark that happened. So, moral of the story is Catherine Pooler's ink does move if it is re-wet. So, these are similar in that way. All right, let's move on to the next, which is going to be what we usually do with Distress Oxide, and that is dipping and swiping. Let's play that little game. And for this one, I'm going to put my blues away. I'm going to keep that yellow out, and I'm going to pull in my spiced marmalade and my orange and my abandoned coral in Coral Cabana. Okay, so I'm going to just label this on the back TH, and this one CP. All right, so let's see how these work. So let me just start off with the Distress ink. I'm just going to lay some color out. And I am keeping respectful of my color family with this because it will create mud if I mix my warms and my lights. That's beautiful. Real pretty wash here. Ooh, I like, you know what? I've never done this technique until you guys said, hey, you need to do this comparison. That turned out really lovely. So this is Tim Holtz, and this is what happens when you go ahead and dip his inks. Now let's do the same thing with the Catherine Pooler ink. See what kind of results we get here. Make sure that I have this all mopped up. All right, so this is one juicy pad, so it's like, I don't really know if we need to, like, ooh, because her pads are really juicy. I like how the Distress ink pads were able to just kind of smooth, like they just, I was able to place them better. They just felt better. They didn't suction cup to it. All right, let's see here. Oh, that's lovely. Oh, this is fun. Okay. Very pretty. All right, so we have here Catherine Pooler and Tim Holtz. And really, yes, the pad made the technique, the smooshing technique, a little bit different. It was Catherine Pooler's ink pads, since they are so moist, wanted to definitely suction cup or kind of stick to the glass mat, whereas the Distress ink glided, but the results are quite similar. So let me just heat set this long enough so I can write on the back whose is whose. All right, so this one was CP, and this was TH. Okay, so for this technique, I'm really not seeing that much of a difference. The vibrancy of the color is about the same. The orange on this one on Catherine Pooler's tended to wash over all the rest of the color, but that could have been because of the way I was dipping it. I don't necessarily think that that is because of the ink. That could have been my technique. All right, so moving on from here, I just want to do some basic stamping. And let me move this all over. So we're going to be stamping with 4 colors because I'm going to be using a turnabout stamp for this. I'm going to be using the Concord and 9th mini spirograph turnabout stamp. And I already have it lined up and kind of ready just to go on this. I'm going to take my Cardstock, again, this is my Gina K 120-pound cardstock. I'm going to apply some temporary adhesive to the corners so that I can go ahead and just line them up on my turnabout jig. And this is a card front size, so it is 4.25 by 5.5. I've already cut it down to that. So for this one, let's go ahead and use, let's see here. I want to do something blue on the next thing. So I think we will use the mustard seed and limoncello, spiced marmalade, and orange twist, twisted citron against lime rickety, and then peacock feathers against Fiesta Blue. And for this, since I've already started off every other technique with the Distress ink, just to keep it simple, let's just go ahead and start this off with the Distress ink as well. Now, Distress ink, I know that they can move if they're reactivated with water, so I am going to start from the lightest color and work my way down. And I purposely threw in a peacock feathers into this because all of the, and this switch, so I've done warm tones is what I'm trying to say, and I have done some cool tones because I want to see how they stamp on top of each other. Like, are they gonna muddy? You know, although if I laid this out right, it shouldn't even touch. So that might be a moot point, but we'll see. Okay, so next up is going to be my spiced marmalade. So this is going to be my orange. I need to rotate so the 2 is up in the right hand corner. And you know, a lot of people do not stamp with Distress ink because that's not how it's been marketed. That's not kind of what we've been taught to do with it. So I'm using this product in a way that it may not have been intended or created for, but that's okay. It just will show the versatility of the product, right? All right, so next up is going to be twisted citron. Let me go ahead and put that over in that corner. Ink that up. Now, mind you, I am really trying to make sure I get a nice coverage of the ink on this. When I do the Catherine Puller, I'm not going to have to touch it more than 1 or 2 taps. Okay, because this is what her ink was created to do. You know, that's what it's been marketed for. Last but not least, we're going to do the peacock feather. So I got that 4 over in that corner. All right, so there we go. And I think that it passed. Like it laid on the other colors beautifully. I do not see any mud on this, which is always my concern when I am using Distress ink, because even though we didn't wet it per se, and if we were to wet it, it definitely would turn into mud, but the ink itself is wet. And we were taking a wet medium and applying it on another, and it did okay. It still held its ground. So that's awesome. So let me go ahead and take this off. And the jig I'm using, this is all from Concord and Ninth. I purchased their little pack that comes with the jig, a stamp, a die, and then also the temporary adhesive, which I love, and this eraser that takes off the temporary adhesive. So I love this little bag. All right, so this was Tim Holtz, right? And now we're going to go ahead and try the same technique with Catherine Pooler, using the similar colors that we've already pulled out. Sorry, off screen, everything wants to fall. All right, so let's go ahead. I want to get this back in my 1 position in the right hand corner. I need to take my temporary adhesive so I can just place this on my turnabout tool. And I do have affiliated links down below, you guys, to Conquer to Ninth or even Blitzy and Catherine Pooler and all that good jazz. If you're interested in any of these products that I'm using and you don't have. Okay, so for this one, again, I'm lining it up. It is a 4.5 by 5.5 base. All right, so since I started with the lightest with Tim Holtz, I'm going to start with the lightest with Catherine Pooler. So we're going to put the limoncello down first. Okay, beautiful image right there. Did I literally just lose my lid? Oh my goodness. Oh, I put it under it. Losing my mind. Haven't had my coffee yet, people. All right, so let me go ahead, rotate this on over to the 2nd position. I'm going to use the orange twist. Now that is a beautiful crisp image if I've ever seen one. So the Distress inks did really well on the stamping. They really did. But now that I'm looking at this, I'm kind of going, wow, that I see it. It's like, that looks great. Like, I love the crispness on it. All right, Lime Rickety now. Actually, that one, not as crisp as I'd anticipated, so I need to go in for a second dip, a second stamp on this. I may need to re-ink my ink pad. One thing about, there we go, that's beautiful. One thing about Catherine Pooler inks is they are very moist, but they also need to be re-inked more, so that's something to take into consideration. I am noticing though, as you guys see, as I clean off the stamp between colors, both of these inks clean off beautifully. It literally just takes my little stamp squeegee, and then I like to follow up with my paper towel just to get it dry, and it really comes off gorgeous. Okay, so from here, there we go. All right, so Catherine Pooler definitely lived up to the name, the expectation of being able to stamp beautiful, crisp images. I'll show that to y'all. Let me take this off. So it definitely does what it says it's going to do. So from here, I wanted to emboss with this. We're going to do the sentiment emboss, but let me just show you real quick a comparison between the Tim Holtz and the Catherine Pooler. Let me get my adhesive off. All right. So that's Catherine Pooler. We'll do it this way. Tim Holtz, Catherine Pooler. Can you really tell a difference? What do you guys think? I can tell a difference just looking at them right here from where I am, but it is so subtle. It's the Catherine Pooler one really is definitely more crisp. It really is a crisper image. The lines on it aren't kind of as loose, but it's so minute, so subtle. The color vibrancy in both of these is spot on. So both of them really great. All right, now I want to take and do some embossing on this. So I pulled out some embossing powder in clear. It's a clear sparkle, and I'm going to just stamp my little sentiment. I also am going to stamp a little heart as well for the center. And I just want to see how that all works together, you know? So what I like to do is I like to just take my block, and I utilize both sides of my block when I do this. So I'm going to do that on that side and this little heart on this side. And then I'm going to just do my sentiment over here, like so. So the first thing I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to be working on that 110 pound or 120 pound cardstock by Gina K. It's the bright white. And just to keep the integrity of what we're doing, so we stay nice and organized and you know, in a routine, I am going to first stamp and emboss Tim Holtz, and then I will stamp and emboss Catherine Puller. So for this, I'm going to use Mermaid Lagoon for Tim Holtz. And let me just get this all ready to go so that there's, you know, I'm not. So I'm going to do Tim Holtz up here. I'll do Catherine Puller here. And then Tim Holtz with the heart. And then Catherine Puller with the heart. Okay, here we go. Now I like to tell you that my heat gun has been warmed up because I have used it to dry some things today, so that should not be, it shouldn't cause any kind of issues. All right, go ahead and hit this with some embossing powder, and let's see how we do. All right, it kind of did, but a lot of it just blew off. So not too sure if I would encourage or recommend embossing with the Distress ink. I like embossing with the oxides better than the Distress ink by far. All right, let's see how Catherine Puller's holds up with this. Okay, so really crisp, beautiful image. Okay, it actually kind of did the same. So with this, I would have to say that, yeah, they emboss about the same. So let me go ahead and make the little heart just to see how that does, and that has a solid image. So we're going to get to see how Tim Holtz Distress works on doing the two tap technique, that the two love tap technique that Catherine Puller we have to do with her ink. But yeah, you guys, they feel about the same. They embossed, but they feel about the same. All right, so for my inside of my heart, I want to use my Abandoned Coral and Coral Cabana. I'm going to go ahead and emboss this one more time just to give both of the inks an opportunity to show me. Maybe I'm wrong. And then for the outside of the heart, I'm going to use the Something Borrowed and the Mermaid Lagoon. So let's start off with the Distress ink in a Abandoned Coral. Now I am going to emboss it all at once, so this will give some time for the ink to set up, which may affect if it embosses or not. Now for Catherine Pooler, I know that it's literally 1-2 taps and I should get a crisp image. So I'm going to do that for both. So we have 1, 2. All right, so that's about the coverage that it gave me. And then 1, 2. And let me go ahead and heat set this. All right. Let me try to heat set. Well, I was going to heat set it from the bottom, but it's a fine embossing powder, so it might be okay like this. All right, so it kind of embossed. I mean, I don't know. I've used other things that emboss better, other inks. So I'm not sold on the embossing factor of so far of either of these inks based on what I've done. Okay, and so let's go ahead and finish off with Catherine Pooler. Again, we are going to do our 2 love tap. You guys did notice that the image on that isn't real crisp for Tim Holtz. So let's see if Catherine Pooler's is better. So we go 1, whoop, 2, boom. Well, maybe I need to re-ink my pad. So that's something you're always going to ask yourself, because that's not as crisp either, as it's about the same coverage as Tim. And there's that. And let me go ahead and just heat set this. They pretty much heat set and emboss the same for this technique. So the Tim Holtz color I actually feel is a little bit more vibrant than Catherine Pooler, but it could be again because I need to re-ink my pad, which kind of shocks me because I haven't used Coral Cabana that much, but it is the oldest one that I have. So time may have definitely... oh, and that's not even heat bossed yet, you guys. That's not even heat set. I just touched it. Gotta let it cool. It's pretty hot. There we go. Now that's heat set. So that's the difference there. All right. So in summary, you guys were dead on the money when you said that this would be a closer comparison. It'd be a better comparison if you're trying to compare product head to head, because they are similar. And I'm glad that you guys, said, hey, do the distress ink. Don't just do the distress oxides, okay? My whole thing with the distress oxides was I knew that they wouldn't move when they were re-wet, and I wanted to see if the Catherine Pooler would do that. And they also are the 2 hottest on the market right now. Distress ink is still hot, don't get me wrong. Between distress ink and distress oxide, I always gravitate towards distress ink. But with that being said, they still both have a place in my craft room. In that if I'm going to stamp crisp images, I'm going to use Catherine Pooler. I love how Catherine Pooler stamps. Now, if you don't have Catherine Pooler, you're totally cool with the distress ink, because looking at that, you really can't tell. I can tell, but you know, if you were to get this in the mail, you wouldn't know what ink they used. So there you go. Embossing, I actually don't want to emboss with either of them. I want to emboss with the oxide. So that to me is a no-brainer. Blending, they were the same to me. Catherine Pooler, Tim Holtz, they did the same thing. Absolutely the same thing in my eyes. They blended the same. The only difference was how the ink laid out onto the glass mat, in that the ink pad itself wanted to stick because it's so moist for Catherine Pooler's ink, and also the type of pad that it is. And the Tim Holtz Distress ink glided well. And then, of course, the blending, I actually like how Tim Holtz's blends better than I do the Catherine Pooler one. It just was a nicer blend. And I'm also concerned with Catherine Pooler's that since you have to put the blending, you have to use a blending tool, which is a sponge that soaks up a lot of ink. And, you know, hers you do have to re-ink quite a bit. So there you go. I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for the recommendation and saying, hey, you know, even if you thought I was wrong in how I did it, I totally heard your feedback and I listened. So I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope that this helps you decide on what you want to do with what you want to purchase. For me, again, both of these inks have a place in my craft room. Both of them do. Detail stamping and just that basic image stamping, I'm going to use Catherine Pooler. And I'm not going to use her on my backgrounds. Just like I'm going to use distress ink for a background, and I'm not going to use it to stamp probably any other time than what you just saw me do here. Because remember that if these get wet, his is going to move definitely more than hers does. So there you go. All right, you guys, I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I will chat with you later. Make sure you join me on Tuesday at 7 o'clock. Thursday at 7 o'clock for another live. And I also have things coming out on Tuesdays. And then check out my website, www.betsgolden.com. And you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter under Bets Golden, and my Facebook page, which is Scrappy Cafe. Until next time, happy crafting.